Well, what should be done? Viewers are writing to me in droves, and your text messages right now are astonishing. How, in the light of all of this, can Daniel Andrews stay when the Health Minister is gone? David Flint is an emeritus professor of law at UTS. He has read law and economics at the universities of Sydney, London and the Sorbonne. He's the national convener of Australians for Constitutional Monarchy and a former chairman of the Australian Press Council. Professor Flint makes a very valid point in an open letter to our viceroys, especially the Governor of Victoria, that the Governor does have powers which should be exercised. The Victorian Governor is Linda Dessau, a jurist and barrister. Andrews gave her the gig. She was previously a judge at the family court. What can the Governor do in this dysfunctional environment? Professor David Flint joins us. Professor Flint, thank you for your time. You're suggesting in relation to this dreadful COVID-19 Omnibus amendment bill, where Daniel Andrews wants to appoint designated officers who could lock up anyone if such officers had a reasonable suspicion such person may be likely to fail quarantine rules. You and I have both mentioned habeas corpus, where if you are to detain someone, you have to provide to a court a valid reason for that person's detention. I might add, where are Canberra on all of this and the Attorney-General? Now, these powers, Professor Flint, go beyond the powers of many police. What could the Governor do?
Well, Alan, the Governor is the ultimate constitutional guardian. That's our system. Since responsible government was introduced, the sovereign lost all of political powers, and the sovereign instead became the leader above politics, being the ultimate constitutional guardian, and not without some power, but based on the principle that the Crown is important not for the power it wields, but the power it denies others. There's this ultimate area of power which is only vested in the Crown, therefore, in Victoria, the Governor. The Governor has special reserve powers, and she speaks, one assumes, regularly in private audience to her Premier, who is her subordinate, and she should be warning him. She has the right to be consulted, the right to encourage, and the right to warn, particularly the right to warn. And it is timely now to remind the Premier that she does have these reserve powers, which include not only the power to dismiss and appoint, there's also a power which King George V last suggested he might be using just before the Great War, and that is the power to refuse assent to a bill.
Correct.
When this outrageous bill comes to the Governor, if it gets through the Legislative Council, the Governor has two rights. And the Constitution of Victoria sets one of those out specifically, and that is the right to propose amendments. The Governor should seek independent advice. She's entitled to do that, as Sir John Kerr did. And all jurists, all considerable jurists in this country, are outraged by this legislation which takes away, as you rightly said, habeas corpus, which means that anybody can be taken off the streets. There can be a midnight knock. You can be taken away by a so-called authorised person, some apparatchik of the ruling party, and then be held in indefinite detention without your ancient common law right to be brought before a court, with the court deciding whether that detention is legal. This is outrageous.
Absolutely.
The very proposition
it
is
will be
outrageous.
It will be outrageous if the Governor continues to prove her impotence in all of this. But as Professor Flint says, she has the right to deny assent. It's pretty simple. I won't sign the bill. Can I take you to Donald Trump? Given that many people would not be aware that law professors can nominate someone for the Nobel Peace Prize, are you and other distinguished professors, Zimmerman, Mowens and James Allen, writing to nominate Donald Trump for what he's done in the quest for world peace?
Yes, we have. It is the third nomination of Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, and it is based on the Trump doctrine. The Trump doctrine is something extraordinary, as so many things that Donald Trump does. He is guided by two things which seem to be absent from so many politicians. He has, firstly, common sense, and he is only guided by a national interest and, therefore, in our circumstances, an interest in the Western alliance. And what he has done with the Trump doctrine is that he has decided that he would no longer have America involved in endless wars, wars which achieved nothing but the killing of thousands of young Americans and enormous debts imposed on America, and nothing solved in the countries in which it is carried on. So he's reducing America's tendency to get involved in any and every war.
And then, of course, the peace deal. Yeah, the peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, 9 other Middle Eastern countries. I mean, if any other president did this, the whole world would be barking Nobel Prize.
Exactly. And what he has done is he decided to negotiate that on the basis of going against expert advice. Everybody told him, oh, no, you must first get the approval of the Palestinians. Now, the Palestinians are led by a dictatorship. They're dominated by a dictatorship. They'll never agree to anything. When Yasser Arafat was given almost the world by Bill Clinton, he's found some reason not to accept it. They don't want peace, not the leadership. The people certainly want peace, of course they do. But what Trump did was he went ahead and negotiated against all advice, but he did it with common sense. He negotiated directly with the Arab states concerned and Israel and brought them together, and these states are lining up, Arab and Middle Eastern, to join that network of peace which will dominate the Middle East. He's also been the first American president to work out how to make America energy independent of the Middle East. So he's not dependent anymore. America's not dependent anymore on Middle Eastern oil as all previous administrations were. But he's been able to go ahead with this. He's calmed tensions in relation to Korea. He's withdrawn from the ridiculous agreement that Obama made, which allowed the mullahs to obtain an enormous amount of money from America, including money flowed in cash to Tehran from the United States, which they invested in terrorism and which allowed them to develop nuclear weapons. He's withdrawn completely from that. He is really producing peace in the world in a way which none of his predecessors did.
Great
and he
stuff.
fully deserves the Nobel Peace Prize.
Good on you. Wonderful stuff. And, of course, you omitted to mention there he sensibly withdrew from that ludicrous Paris agreement.
Oh, yes. Yes. No, he's the only Western leader who's decided that he will not ruin his country by signing up and complying with the Paris Agreement, which is ridiculous. In this country, for example, it's given us the most expensive electricity in the world, whereas we should really have the cheapest.
Absolutely.
Because we're the biggest uranium, the biggest iron ore, the biggest coal exporters in the world.
Wonderful. Wonderful to talk to you. Thank you for your scholarship. Thank you for your insights. We'll now follow as to whether Linda Dessau, the Governor of Victoria, does go by what you say, to exercise her reserve powers and withhold assent from some of that ridiculous legislation. Good to talk to you, Professor Flint. Very grateful for your time.